Welcome to the January Donovan Show. And today we have a special guest, Maria Ollis, which is one of our wholeness coaches. And in this platform is where I get to ask Maria some questions, and then Maria gets to flip and ask me some questions. So, Maria, thank you so much for being here today and just have a fun conversation about life. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, January. This is really an honor and a
Oh,
privilege, and I'm so grateful to get to spend this time with you.
oh, I'm so grateful. So let's just get started. How would you describe Maria in 3 words for our audience?
Okay, great. I'm actually gonna answer this two different ways. I hope that's okay.
Oh, yeah, please.
Um, I was okay to answer the question first. I would say uh, determined.
Mm,
When I determine to do something, I'll usually see it through. Sometimes even I'm getting better at this, kind of recognizing my limits and recognizing kind of the bigger picture. But even like in pregnancy, if I'm not feeling well, like I committed, I'm going to show up. So I'm just determined. I would also say a student.
I love these
I
words.
um, I can't remember what it's called, the Clifton Strengths Finder or something. It's one of those. But one of my top five was learner, and I took this like
Oh,
10 years ago. Um, but that's always stuck with me, and that I love to learn and
mm,
I love to study things. And um, some ways that has served me is with each pregnancy, I've learned new things about stretching, exercise, nutrition,
yeah,
just to better have a capacity, because that has been challenging, just my pregnancies health wise. Um, but I'm constantly studying, like
that's
studying some of the new
humility.
pursuits we're doing here with the animals and some illnesses that we're navigating. And just, I love to study. I
Mm,
love to study. Um, and the third one, I would say hardworking.
mm. Those are great
I feel
descriptions.
such satisfaction from hard work, especially physical hard work with my hands, like doing things, physically doing things. So,
Wow.
and then actually, so I love January how you always encourage us to have a compelling vision of the future. And
Mhm,
so what I did with my current class is on class one, we each wrote down 3 words that we want to become by the end
mhm.
of the class journey.
Wow.
And so my 3 words are wise.
Mm,
So I think sometimes I like to collect knowledge, which is true, but I want to actually be wise.
mm,
Um, Another one is resilient.
mhm,
So mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually resilient. And then resourceful. So
mm.
as new layers of life come, I want to constantly learn how to be more resourceful in new situations.
Well, Maria, it's just beautiful. I know our previous conversation a few minutes ago, I just talked and admired just how much you've grown. Honestly, like even your descriptions about who you are, the aspirations of the woman you are choosing to become. It really is beautiful to witness and bear witness to your commitment and your hard work, really your humility, because that's probably the foundation of it all is the willingness to be uncomfortable and grow and learn. So thank you for sharing. For our audience here, Maria is one of our wholeness coaches, a women's school coach. And so she walks women through the New Woman Masterclass with the women's, there are different versions of it now. So I want to just ask Maria for our audience to outline, what this class has done to the women that you're serving. But let's start with what it's done for you. And the reason for is because we truly believe in the women's school that there's no training on how to be a woman today, which is why so many women are suffering. And our vision in the women's school is to offer a school that teaches women how to be a woman or to live a life of excellence, and which is really what we teach in the women's school is an integrated version of the woman. So I want to get Maria's feedback on the masterclass that we believe is the class that every woman needs, her experience for herself. What's it been like for you, Maria, before?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say because I'm such a doer and I like to pursue things and I just like to be such a doer, I often would be either burnt out or on the verge of burnout and like not really knowing how to pull myself back because I just wanted to go like go for something with everything I had. but I wasn't aware of, like you mentioned, the integration, like the integration of all the parts of my life. And so I I guess I probably didn't have the words for it, but if I was made to describe it at that time, I probably would have said that I totally believed that in order to have one thing, you have to sacrifice a bunch of other things. It has to be at the expense. And that was, in some ways, how I was living my life. Just thinking that, like, if I want to pursue this, it means I have to set down all these other things. And maybe I need new resources, or maybe I need new skills, and maybe being like a multi-passionate person like I am, maybe God is calling me to a lot of things, but there's more patience. There's more patience in getting there. And I would say that was, um, well, both of those things, the integration and the patience with the progress, were huge for me. Like I can be kind of an impatient person. Like I kind of wanted things yesterday, and it's I've just learned that, like, that doesn't serve me. Um, yeah, so I guess going back to when I took the class, I had just had a newborn. It was our first, and I had just left a job. Well, we moved to a different state for my husband's new job. And so I had left my work, which was nannying for this lovely family for about 3 years. And so that transition to having my first was actually maybe challenging in some different ways. And I don't at all want to downplay, like a lot of people say, oh, the first is the hardest, and then you kind of figure it out. But it was hard for me because I didn't have a boss anymore. I didn't have a metric of how I was doing. I wasn't getting paid, to be home, which is what I always wanted. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Um, but I was in a new community, and it was right before the shutdowns happened. So I was really struggling, just to kind of, like, I guess, be happy with myself, because I didn't always know, like, what was good enough, or what even the metric was. Um, so it was such a gift, perfect timing when I was introduced to the class, and I'm just so grateful.
Oh, well, I can see the massive difference just in every week that we see each other, which is so nice in the mastermind. Just the growth, I think, and your commitment. So tell me just a little bit, what do you see in your students, the masterclass, how it has changed their life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say generally it starts a lot with awareness. I think a lot of ladies, myself included, get stuck in thinking, like, well, this is just my life circumstances, or this is just how it is, or this hard thing is happening. And there could be a lot of awareness with, like, okay, but what am I doing or not doing? Or how am I aware of, like, my tone, my body language, my how I'm contributing in a room? And just starting with that awareness, it helps open so many more doors of opportunity. Um, I would say that, and just like being stuck in inaction, being stuck in not knowing what to decide, and then not doing anything. So just having, like, breaking down some action steps, and just actually having a goal, like having a dream that draws us forward and pulls us forward, um, is is pivotal. So I would say, I mean, there's so many things, but those are kind of two that I would say it boils down to.
Well, I think most women are not ever taught to dream and given permission to even discover the desires of their heart. We just accept it. Whatever is there, this is it. This is as good as it gets. And I always just think, but don't we have an abundant God? And somehow, for some reason,
Yes.
women don't associate this idea of an abundant God with an
No.
abundance of joy, time, freedom, and it's almost a disconnect. Like there's a disassociation between this good God that wants us to live a beautiful life to the God who just wants us to suffer all day and every day, as though I want that for my child. I mean, it really, um, it's become an epidemic, I think, because we have this disordered understanding even of God. So, anyways, this is the time we can flip, and you get to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. So you can bring in your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have some questions for you. Before we get to that, though, actually, a couple things you just highlighted. I've had some recent conversations where just the other day I was talking about how, like, the idea of how God wants good things for us, like how he wants an abundant life. And the person responded right back, like, yeah, in heaven. And I was like, no, but here too, like, he wants such good things for us so that we have the capacity to be generous, to have full lives as parents to model to our kids. Um, and the other thing of this idea of sacrifice, that it's like, I don't know that anyone would really put it to these words, but like the most direct way I can think of saying it is that more suffering equals being more holy.
Mhm.
And I just, I wrestle with that. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess maybe that's my first question. What would your response be to that belief that, like, more suffering or offering it up, which I think there's so much merit
Mhm.
in redemptive suffering, but I think sometimes the suffering is unnecessary. Could you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I'm going to say so. So I'm just going to go through there. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I always say that because we aspire for joy on for heaven, but not joy on earth. Like your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Why is it that women don't believe that the God who loves us wants us to be joyful, peaceful, and here on earth? I mean, from a very logical perspective, from a parent to a child, which just models a trinity, like, do I really want my child to suffer every day, every single day for the rest of our life? And that then becomes his identity is how do you love me so much that you suffer? Like it's a disordered kind of love, but yet we make comments like, oh yeah, in heaven, and without actually thinking of the ripple impact of, so you're meaning to say God put you on earth to suffer every single minute of the day without reprieve? What kind of a God do you have? So that's number one. I think that we should think about the relationship like a relationship. I think that there's my children suffer because of their own actually as a natural consequence of their ill behavior, right? If
Mhm.
they ate something that's too much junk food or they were disrespectful and we had to hold them accountable. I think sometimes we blame God for our suffering when the reality is that we're simply not disciplined. We're simply not actually developing a life of excellence. So if our lives are sloppy, we will suffer unnecessarily. Don't God isn't everything, but the idea that that's how God wants us to do. So let's just break this down. You are binging on social media all night. Then you only have 5 hours of sleep because you have to get up the next morning because you have to take care of your children. And then all of a sudden you have little energy and you're snappy and your toddler screams because they're a toddler and they don't know how to communicate effectively. But your narrative is motherhood is really hard.
Yep.
No, actually, you had 5 hours of sleep because you were in Instagram for 3 hours. You didn't do the dishes. So now you have to wake up with dishes that are dirty and you're snapping at your toddler because you're physically tired and you don't have a routine. So you just shoved yourself in the morning and you had no time for quiet, for prayer, for silence, and then repeat 365 times a year, 5 years straight. This is the way God designed life. Every day is a redemptive suffering. No, everything could be a redemptive suffering, but do you know what's more of a suffering? Discipline. You know what's more of a
Absolutely.
suffering? Saying no to yourself so that let's just reverse engineer that. Okay. Because this idea of like, well, this is the way God wants it. Well, maybe God wants you to say no to social media and really be disciplined about your time and get to bed by 9:30 when your children go to bed. Do the dishes fast. Find tools that are effective to do the dishes not for an hour, but to do them right away every single morning, lunch, and dinner so the dishes don't pile up. And you're so concrete and effective that you're now cleaning only half an hour a day. You have the children an ordered, disciplined rhythm of life that allows you to pray, be peaceful, and then you sleep and you've got time with your spouse. And then you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I've got 8 hours sleep. And by the way, I discipline myself so I didn't eat junk food, so I have a lot of energy. So now your toddler is screaming, and you're like, oh, toddler scream. I had time this morning to study, and I studied behaviors of children. I had time for quiet. I had time to actually train my mind so I have ample energy to be patient. Is motherhood hard? Now reverse now 365 days a year. Life is good. Life is beautiful. Now the suffering happened by my ability to actually say no to myself and not succumb to my carnal desires. So what am I saying here? I think that there are real sufferings in the world that actually help us grow to become the best whole version of ourselves. I think there are unnecessary suffering because we're unwilling. And I think the latter is more prevalent. But I think more importantly, it's also, I think, with women who have faith, who have made an excuse of a life less excellent, as then that becomes their narrative that life is supposed to be hard. It's not very inspiring to our children or our spouse or
Not
to
at
the
all.
um so is there real suffering? Yes. Try pursuing a dream so big that it humbles you and it asks of you to gain new skill set that you're willing to fail, get crucified, get criticized, try up again in the morning, say no to 999% of the things that are asked of you, to say yes to the one thing, which is say no to the good, to say yes to the great. Try that life and see if what I mean, that's a real the suffering is right there, but it's a suffering that is ordered towards your higher purpose. So it feels redemptive because you know you're moving your purpose forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's the discipline, it's also the consistency
Yeah.
to keep doing those things and not kind of swing the pendulum and like, oh, I'm going to go all for it and start this intense workout this week, but then it falls off because it's just like it's choosing intentionally and then consistently doing it over time.
Over time. Yeah,
And
it's easy to go
that's
diet like
actually
yeah, go ahead. Yes, question.
oh, yeah, next question.
Oh,
Actually I had a fun one for you. I'm just
yes.
curious, unless you have more to add on that. I didn't mean to
No.
cut you off.
Mhm. No, no, you can
Okay,
go.
just kind of a fun question. I was curious because I've never asked you, what was your first date with Ryan and what's your favorite date to do with him?
Oh, that's so fun. First, I didn't think it was a date. I didn't know. And so I was kind of naive. And at that point, I was so detached from the outcome. I had trained my mind for years, and it took me a long time to be detached from the outcome, even though I desired so much to be in a great relationship. I thought, I want it, I know, but at the end of the day, I have to be detached. So I was at that point. So when I met him, I was like, I am detached from the outcome. Anyways, Ryan was always intentional about, I guess he knew what he wanted. So he developed a conversation with me at work because we were at work in real estate, and he said, "I have some grievances about feminism or femininity." Like, and I was thinking in my head, "You're talking to the wrong woman." Like, I was like, kind of like, so I said, "Well, I'd love to clear and help you work through it, that conversation. Like just." And then he said, "How about Friday night?" And I remember thinking in my mind, I got an email, and I was like, yeah, I guess Friday night is when you go out and talk through theology and philosophy about womanhood. Like it was like just I think not registering. So I told my friend, I was like, Muff, I just need to clear conversation with this guy about some things that he needs clarity in. I just wanted to like be a contribution. I'll be done in an hour. I'll see you. And my friend's like, you won't see me. And I was like, yes, I will. I was like, and so he comes in our first date. I was babysitting a dog. I lived in DC apartment in a small apartment. He was early. Ryan's always early. And he gives me a hug, and I'm like, I guess coworkers give each other a hug. I was like, literally, I don't know. I was just in denial. That's just what it was. I was in denial. And so I just remember, okay, and so he takes me to this restaurant, which is walking distance because in DC, everything's walking distance. And he was so intentional, Maria. He's like, well, we have
Mm.
fun. And then he's like, well, let me tell you why I'm here. I'm like, and I don't get nervous with guys. Like I'd go out with guys one day. We're like, I just, and I remember like my nervous laugh. I'm like, just like, and so he just like very, he said, I'm very interested in you and I'd like to get to know you more. And I was like, just, and so that was it. We just had a great conversation. I couldn't get a word in. He asked me so many questions about me, which was not the norm. I always ask a lot of questions with guys. And so that was really it. And I said, I have to go to bed early because I go to mass the next day. It's been 10:30 or so. And then he called me right away. And he said, left a voicemail. I still have it 18 years ago.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. I re-recorded it somewhere. And he said, I'm very fascinated by you. And the rest is really history. He just pursued me very intentionally. So that was our first date. Favorite date? I have to be honest with you. I love every time with him. I don't know. That's a really hard thing to say. We really love to be with each other and we make every excuse to be together. And it's challenging with 8 children.
Hmm.
But our marriage has becomes better every year. And I think it's because we're growing. And
Yes. And you're both committed to that. You're
yeah,
both
it's,
committed to
yeah,
studying, to growing, to becoming that next version of yourself.
yeah.
And when you're doing that together, that has to be so incredible. Like,
Ye-
yeah, I can't imagine. Because you're, what, 18 year or what are you?
Yeah,
18
18
years in?
years. Yeah, next
Okay.
in a couple weeks. Yeah. 18
Oh,
years.
happy early anniversary.
Oh, thank you. And I think it's because we're not the same person. Like you said, we don't even recognize each other
Yes.
because we're always growing exponentially. The challenging part of our conversation is because when you're growing together and you're wrestling with limiting beliefs or new versions of yourself, there are hard conversations. And I think that's where our challenging conversation is, but it's nourishing. It's there's deep
Yes.
level of love and respect and admiration. So yeah, I always just think that we need to advertise marriage in a way that wants other people to get married, just like motherhood, and I just think it's so important. And I always tell my children, I said, what good is building a business if I don't make your father's lunch? If if I don't have his avocado for breakfast and have that ready prepared. So these things that are unordered priorities, and vice versa. Like I am first in his life and there's not a shadow of a doubt. And that's just clear. It's always been
Yes.
clear. uh, and I think that's makes a difference. We build a business together. There's 8 children. Like there's a lot of just distractions that could go between us, but we're just always committed to each other. So yeah, it gets
That's
better.
so beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for
Actually, I never heard
asking.
that story. So thank you for sharing. Actually, my next question I'd like to pivot. I don't know how we're doing on time here.
Oh, we're good. I'll
Um,
let you know.
okay, so I'm just looking here. So basically, going to give a little context, and then this question actually pertains to marriage and motherhood. So I
Mhm.
recently had a wonderful conversation. Just going to kind of paint the picture a little bit for this woman. So, and then I'll try to build on her question. So basically, she's newly married, and but um, her parents don't quite have all the aspects of marriage that she wants to model after. Not that they had a bad marriage, but just there are some aspects that she doesn't want to live out. And she feels that perhaps she has her own idea of what a traditional wife would be, and then a traditional role, and then perhaps her husband has some ideas, and maybe they're not all quite on the same page. And she's also at the stage where they recently had baby number two. And so
Mhm.
life shifted. And she wants help. I think maybe kind of incorporating her husband more, asking for help. But she was told as a little girl and her sisters that you're a strong, independent woman. And so she kind of has this, she, things can bottle up. And then she has
Yeah.
the conversation and then it ends poorly and she's discouraged to have that conversation again with her husband. Um, and then so he has helped in like cooking more meals since the second baby's been born, but then she feels like part of her identity is taken away because she feels like that's my job, the dishes and the laundry and all of the home things. So I guess I'm not really sure what the question is in there. That's kind of a lot of different aspects. But what would you say to that woman?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is that there seems to be a frustration in some of the beliefs that she has inherited that's not working out well in her current life. Let's say, for example, she may have had a belief that she inherited that only girls do the kitchen and not women. I'm just assuming men, right? And so now she can't do it because she's postpartum or for whatever reason, she's two little babies. So now it's a conflicting belief where, you know what, I actually want help in the kitchen. That's actually a good thing in this particular season of my life. But because that makes me feel like I am not a good mother or wife, not a good mother or wife. So part of the issue is that she probably has all these convoluted beliefs that she has no clarity about. So it's all just kind of she's
Sure.
feeling the burden of, am I not a good mom? Am I a good mom? This should be, and it's all these different things, and that's why I think awareness is a first, uh, you know, the first step to breaking the prison. Because unless you're aware, you can't break free from it. So I think the first step is, what are some beliefs that you know that no longer serve you? For example,
I love that question.
yeah.
Such a good question.
Yeah. Well, maybe the belief that men should not help, men can only work out of the house, and I'm the only one in charge of the household. Like, that was okay 100 years ago when we didn't have the internet, when there were not a lot of demands of women, but now women are doing a whole lot more. So it's it's not a sustainable model to presume that she has to do everything by herself with the kind of world that we live in. um, and not be frustrated, not be physically, emotionally, spiritually tired. So I think that's number one. And then the other belief, the second belief, is it seems to me that she's equating her production with her worth. So if I'm a good mom, if I can do the dishes, and if I can do it all by myself, and that's what independent woman is, then I am a valuable human being. So now she
Mm,
feels worthless because you're postpartum and you can't do much. And you're just limited, right? For everybody's got different recovery time. And so now she doesn't feel valuable. So the second belief is that our value is not contingent on our production. And that's often what a belief has. And so I think the third question is, how do you want to design your life together? Like, what does that look like? Like, does it look a lot like, I'm going to do the best that I can, but we're not 50-50. And you know what? Right now, you've got to hold the fort down and you're going to have to do the dishes. And what is wrong with that? It's let's design a beautiful life where we're working together towards a common goal, which is to be whole and create an inspiring life and marriage for our family. And I think uniting that vision is clear, so that, see, that design informs which belief no longer serves her.
yeah, that's such a great point because it's forward looking. It's what do I want this to become?
Yeah, yeah. And most
And
women
you
don't
talk
think
about
about
that a lot.
that. Well, because, Maria, to me, women don't stop to think, what do I want and don't want? So
Oh,
these
absolutely.
inherited beliefs, traditions, or for whatever reason, which are some good and some not so good, or some good but doesn't work for me right now, we carry them and we inherit them. And so we have to then ask ourselves, well, what do I want here? What do I not want? It should be a question we ask ourselves on a consistent basis. The problem is we were never trained to ask that. So the question itself makes us feel as though we are a bad woman, we're asking for too much. I mean, the question itself poses some limiting beliefs, creates a visceral reaction to so many different women. Some women cry, some women are angry, some women just shut down. And that's part of the problem, because the desires of our heart reveal so much of what God is actually telling us. And to suppress the desires of our heart is a suppression of both our purpose and our call, and also our uh, what makes us peaceful and joyful. No, not all desires are good, but to suppress it is to suppress it is to shut down any kind of fulfillment. I mean, it's a really disordered understanding of desires. It's the maturity of desires that we should order. Sure, my kids want ice cream, right? So do I just say no ice cream forever? Or do I say, well, let's have ice cream in a way that is ordered towards what you really want, which is quality health. So what that looks a lot like, maybe once a week or once every month. So do you see what I mean? It's just two radical
Mhm.
extremes. And so the
It's
disorder or depression, because suppression leads to depression. Suppression leads to
Hmm.
rebellion, either depending on the personality. Look at the world right now. Suppressed desires, especially for those people who have families who say, well, you have to do this, you have to go to church. Sure, that's what I want for you. But what I really want for you is to choose it for yourself. And for you to choose it for yourself, you
Absolutely.
want it for yourself. So I just think that women need training on how to even discover the desires of their heart, but study the desires of their heart. And here's the biggest consequence of suppressed desire. How could we go before God and say, well done, a good and faithful servant? You have done what I have asked of you. How do you know what God is asking of you? The desires of
Great question.
revealed who
The
you
cookie
are.
cutter mold of what seems like it's the things I should be doing. Like, I think that is the case for a lot of women. Like, it's,
Yeah, it is a case. And I'll give you one last story. So to wrap up, I had a really good friend of mine, and we shared a very deep faith, and our friendship was so rich and beautiful. I started doing the women's school, and I started having a life in social media. We were ordered towards. We wanted a holy life. We wanted to have an ordered understanding of our faith. And as soon as I posted on social media, she then attacked me as that's vain, that's prideful. In the meanwhile, me going on social media felt like humiliation, like because it was not what I didn't. I was literally putting myself out there, but she had a disordered understanding, and I remember having a conversation with her. I said, "What if my holiness actually meant courage to do what I didn't want to do for the sake of a call that is unique to me and different to you?" But she couldn't understand it. And it was really challenging for our friendship because I couldn't fully understand what God was asking. This was like, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, maybe. I couldn't fully understand. Now I see it now. But what if I allowed her to suppress my desires and said, you're right. I shall shut down anything of social media. You're right. For me to be holy, I should just not have a public life. I mean, Maria, think about, you know, my accountability before God if I
absolutely.
allowed that to be the case. But that could have been easily be the case. I respected her, I admired her, I loved her, and she hurt me for years. I cried the pain of her friendship for years because I felt so alone and isolated and judged for the very thing that God wanted me to do when I expected her to be there for me. Our faith was deep. And so if I had said, you know what? You're right. Holiness means I should never have a public life and never social media and to live a quiet life. Where would be the women's school? Like,
Not
I mean,
here. I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be
you
here.
know, we've reached thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of formation in women's lives. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that to my own horn. I'm saying that I would have been culpable before God.
Yes.
Here's a question I have for all women who are listening. How many of you are sitting in a purpose and a call that you have negated because of fear, because of what people think, that is suffocating the very purpose of why God placed you on earth? It's a constipation of purpose. So, why is life hard? Why? Because we're in perpetual labor. We can't give birth to the very life that would actually give us more life. I mean, I know I'm speaking metaphorically, but how many women in the world right now are sitting in labor because they cannot give birth to their purpose? And you can imagine like being just like, no, but don't you think that is the case? God put a
No,
seed
I
of purpose
love
in
that
you.
visual. Like, I literally just pictured myself in labor for a moment. And, like, okay, no, this is excellent. I love this because, like, you can actually resist labor unintentionally
Yeah.
by what's going on mentally, physically, or I'm scared, it hurts, like all these kind of things. This is actually something I've studied, and I feel very passionately about this. For those who don't know, you now know that we do home birth. Um, but like when you choose something like that, you have to know like there's no pain mitigation, there's no emergency, cut me open because I'm done and tired. Um, of course, there's always the option to go an emergency ambulance to the hospital if necessary, which is very rare. Um, But the idea of like resisting labor, that's when you have more frequency of tearing. You have more frequency of the baby being in distress. It takes longer. Like it's like, yeah, if we can just say, like, here is my purpose, like, here is my call. I am focusing my energy and attention, and I am easing this baby out. Not
Yeah.
forcing and pushing, but like I am easing this baby out.
Yeah.
I literally had the midwife didn't make it in time for our second. And so I eased that baby out. I was almost trying to hold her in, but I couldn't do it, you know, against the forces of nature. Um, it was amazing. Like it was such a good experience, and everything went tremendous. But um, I for those women who haven't given birth yet, like I hope if that's your calling, you have the privilege someday. But it is, I don't know. I just love talking about birth. So I don't want to get too much on a
Oh,
tangent
yeah,
here.
I think yeah. Well, I think the point is that we are here to labor our purpose in this world, not to
Absolutely.
actually keep it. And I think designed to bring more life in the world. And we live in a lifeless world. Look at the women, look at our culture, look at society right now. There's no life. And so when good women are negating their duty to labor and love, which is by the way, study, interior formation, to actually give birth to the call of their heart, the world suffers. I think that
Absolutely.
the problem with darkness, I always think about this. You know, when I look at the state of the world, I can complain about it or I can do something about it. The problem with darkness is not darkness, it's lack of light.
Lack of light. Yes.
And without light, the darkness is actually it's disseminated. And so good women need to labor to bring forth their light. And that looks a lot like daily interior work, the chiseling of the soul. What
Hmm.
else is worthy work? I mean, think about it. What else is worthy work than to give birth to your divine purpose? And we can talk a good talk, you know, God's will. And I'm like, ultimately, your life will be the metric in which you reveal God to the world. The joy, the peace, the harmony. And if it's incongruent, that also does something. It also has a negative consequence to the world, which is probably why people don't want to, are repelled by people who are hypocritical about their faith. You say you have a God of love and you speak to me in a way that's not loving. Why should I believe in your God? You think you believe in
But I
God.
think good people could be so unaware of that. They could be so unaware of tone, of their presence, and they have such good intentions, but it goes back to being unskilled and untrained.
They're a lot, they're unaware. I think we have a leadership issue, a leadership that's void of formation. I think we have a lot of good, well-intended theology that does not actually become incarnate because of a
Mm.
lack of formation. So I think that's why we believe in the school as a formation school for women. It's make
Well, the
make
formation is the freedom.
formation
It's
is
the
freedom.
freedom.
Yeah,
It
it's what
is
allows you. It's
because
what
if you
allows
have
you to live out your
illusions, it
call
could
and
be
your purpose.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I would say for mothers out there who have never thought about the training necessary to become a mother, you have a chance to cut the generational crisis in your family line. Like anxiety, stress, depression, you know, frustration, anger, all that might not be your fault, but it could very well be in your hands to then change the future by you dying to your old self, old habits, old limiting beliefs, old mindset. And it's very possible. That's what we do in the women's school. The hardest thing I have to do is to sell women on actually investing in themselves. And I tell women, I'm like, oh, you know, how could you give to
But
the
it's
world?
selfish, January. Why would I spend money on myself? That's
Yeah,
selfish.
yeah. And that's, I think it's a very, I would say, immature idea of selfishness, but when they're not saying that, you know, it's just a very shallow understanding of generosity because the goal is sustained generosity that
Yes.
creates generational impact.
I think it
Thus,
might go back to just not believing that they're worthy or that they deserve things. Like they should just be giving and doing and not be receiving. But it's like the feminine nature is to receive.
Let's see. The nature of a woman is her capacity to nurture, but if a woman lacks a capacity for receptivity, then how can she be the nurturer of humanity?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really complex. We've complicated it, but imagine if we then assumed our divine role to be nurturers of humanity by first assuming our roles to be actually receptive to training. I mean, our very biology, the fact that we have a pelvis that defines us between what a man and woman is, that's how you know you're a woman. That distinguishes us. Men don't have a pelvis to protect our organs and a womb. That's where
Mm.
we receive life. Our biology indicates actually our purpose and our call. And it's so beautiful because we receive life, we nurture it, and we give life back. That is the woman. That is who she is. And so I urge anyone who's listening, train harder than you ever trained before, and die to your old self. Inform yourself to be the woman that you were actually created and you want to be. Dare to discover the deepest, most amazing desires of your heart. Dare to go there. Like, dare to want what you
Yeah,
want.
and let yourself. It can feel scary,
It
but
can feel scary. You're vain. It's not important. Money is bad. That's, doesn't make you holy. All the things that I remember I really suffered for when I had my friend, and all the beliefs I had to really wrestle with, of doubt. And a lot of it because we don't know who we are.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that too, and just sharing like your wrestling and your own journey because I've experienced that too. Maybe probably not nearly on the level of you, but just some close friends. You know, it's not always what they say, but you can feel the judgment.
Oh yeah, I still
I've
feel the
become a
judgment.
different person, and this is not judging on them or anything, but as I've become a different person, I think it can make them feel uncomfortable with where they're at or where they're not. And so it's not even necessarily something I did or didn't do, but there's still that pain in the friendship and the judgment.
Yeah.
And I have one beautiful friend who recently told me, she came back to me years later and was like, "Hey, I've, been learning about some of these things. And I just got to say, I'm kind of sorry I sort of judged
Oh,
what you
that's
were
beautiful.
doing." And so like, what a gift with that friendship. But yeah, I would going back to what you were saying at the beginning, like this school, the women's school, I tell a lot of people, I believe every woman on the planet is meant to take this master class. And that it's just a matter of time until they're invited, until they're receptive, until they're ready to take it. And I think the work you've done, January, the suffering you've gone through, and the wrestling, and thank you for sharing that. Has just borne such fruit. Like the, there has to be old deaths. It's just like in the life cycle, like plants die, animals die, the manure fertilizes, it creates new rich soil for new
Mhm.
life. And
Yeah.
we don't always get to see what that next life cycle is, but it's there for future generations. And I know you won't know until the end of time all the good that you've done and that you've planted and carried forward for the world. So I just want to thank you. It's been such a privilege and such a gift. And I'm so grateful to be a student of yours and
Oh,
to
thank
be
you.
doing this
I
great
remain a
work. So
student.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I remain a student of this work. I really do. And I think that I've received um, great consolation in the recent years to see the fruit of women's lives. Like, to me, you don't get to see it make sense right away. It took years, and you realize, oh, that was redemptive suffering. It didn't feel like it, and I feel like I'm now going to that new self image of myself where I have to die to my old self, which is why the 3.0 is called the new woman, because we have to die to our old self to give rise to the new woman. It can't be both. There's a time for planting and there's a time for harvest. And I think that a lot of times, going back to your friend, a death to our old self requires grief to the people around us. It's grief.
Yes.
That's what they experience. It's grief of the known. And so It's challenging. But once you do it over and over again, you realize this is the only way to live. Otherwise, I'm the same woman year after
Oh,
year,
yeah.
and you endure the
But
challenges.
even less, because you can't actually ever stay the same. You actually go backwards
You're right.
because
You're
new
right.
failures happen, a new pregnancy, a new responsibilities at work, new relationships, new challenges, maybe a marriage. And so now you have in laws, and like there's always new things happening. And so, not to be a discouragement to anybody, like, oh, you're just piling up if you're not doing anything to move yourself forward, but like it does, like that's the truth. If you're not moving forward, you're actually moving backwards because life literally never stands still. Like the planet pivots, like we go through seasons, spring, fall, like life never stands still. And so if we're not moving forward, it's like the life of virtue. If we're not moving towards our relationship with God, we're actually
Dying.
moving away.
We're not going, we're dying. There's really no other, no, there's no other way. And I love it because when even rocks move. Did you know that? And sometimes, Christians get kooky about this, but if you look at it under a microscope, everything is in motion. That's the first, like
Yes,
everything is in motion. That's the first, I
because
think.
matter has energy. Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
it's
Yeah. And so this concept that, we're stationary, that we're not mobile, we're not moving is really not even in harmony with the nature that God designed us. Even rocks can move, in the
yeah.
vibration of they're just, we can't see it. And so my point in saying that is that we are designed to move, but do you move forward or backwards? And that's where women get to choose.
Well,
So,
and maybe we should wrap up here. I'm checking the time.
well, thank you so
One
much,
thing,
Maria. I love a great
yeah,
heart to heart conversation. I really,
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I just want to
yeah.
add one last thing. One
Yes,
thing I
please.
used to believe, and I used to live my life as if everyone else's life was moving forward and mine wasn't moving forward as quickly, and
Mm,
opportunities, like I used to believe that like, and so I didn't get married right out of college like I wanted to. It was a few years later, and like other things, just didn't happen to my plan. And so I kind of had this belief. And then, like, okay, I don't want to just like over kind of simplify this because everybody's on their own journey, takes different timelines. But ever since I've started doing this work 3+ years ago, when I took the class and then took the training, invested further, and became a coach, life has happened at such a faster rate, and like good things keep coming. But I think maybe those opportunities would have been there. I just would not have been able to receive or acknowledge them or have the capacity because I didn't have the skill set. And so I'm not saying like, oh, take this class and everything's going to magically, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. But it's just so many more good things have happened in my life, and I've had the capacity for them ever since I've done this work. So if anyone's on the fence, like, I mean, your future looks different than mine. Your calling, not everyone's meant to have, a small farm and a small acreage and do all the things we're doing and have home births. But like, whatever it is that you're called to, if you do the work, they will start happening more quickly and you'll have the capacity.
mhm.
So I just wanted to
It's
add
exponential,
that.
and that's what we're seeing. Well, because you have a different perception, and it was always there. You just couldn't see. You didn't have the eyes or the heart to see it.
Absolutely.
The miracles that God has actually designed and ordained all throughout every season of your life. You just couldn't see it. And that's what's beautiful. So
So
thank you
true.
so much, Maria, for sharing your heart today and for your friendship and for believing in this interior work of woman. It's a class that everyone needs. That's truly what we believe. And so our work has just begun. Your work has just begun as a coach because we have work to do in our culture. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here. And if anybody's on the fence, would love to have you join us in this formation training called the New Woman Masterclass. And together we can do our part to rebuild. So thank you all.
Thank you, January.